Do we Australians really want to work till we're 70? Do we want our superannuation locked away till we're 70 or even older? A new report raises the 70 prospect. Every Friday we're joined by Liberal MP Wyatt Roy from the electorate of Longman in Queensland. Wyatt, welcome back to Breaking Politics.
Thanks.
Are you a supporter of the notion of a retirement age of 70 plus?
Well, I think that this is a report and the government, this is not government policy yet, but I think it's incredibly important that as a nation we have this debate. There is an inevitable demographic challenge for us as a nation as the population ages, as we have a demographic bubble of older Australians and as Australians live longer. And we have to have a very serious public policy discussion about how we meet those challenges. Now, part of that probably inevitably will be the lifting of the retirement age as Australians live longer, and you know, we have many Australians. And the Productivity Commission report actually points this out, that there will be a threshold where there are more Australians that are over 100 than babies being born, and the challenges for us are significant.
And getting that mix, it's almost inevitable, isn't it, that we say to Australians, healthy Australians, we need you to work longer.
I think if we're living longer, inevitably we will have to work longer, and it is a significant challenge for our country. But as policymakers, we have to decide, do we want to bury our head in the sand and pretend that the population isn't ageing, pretend that there isn't this demographic bubble, or do we have a serious discussion about how we meet these long-term challenges as a nation, these 30, 40, 50-year challenges? And as I said, I think there are a series of policy areas that we have to focus on entitlements, on individual saving and securing our own wealth, and lifting the productive capacity of the economy. And if we do those three things and we have success in those three areas, I think that we can really meet these challenges from a position of strength. But the longer we put this debate off, I think the more dangerous it will be for future generations of Australians.
Does 70 sound right to you as a new age limit for retirement?
Well, I think that it's appropriate that bodies like the Productivity Commission make those recommendations. Probably individual politicians picking those ages is pretty dangerous, but it is quite obvious that Australians are living a lot longer than they were 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and part of that will be staying in the workforce for a long period of time. I actually have one of the oldest electorates in the country, and one of the most common conversations I have is with how do we keep older Australians in the workforce because they want to stay in the workforce, even if that's not in a full-time capacity, just in a part-time capacity. I think that's really important, and if an Australian that was otherwise not in the workforce is in the workforce, not only are they not drawing on taxes, but they're actually paying taxes because they're generating an income. And I think that this is an important debate to have. And I think it's important, you know, we have extreme understanding that these, you know, Australians have worked their entire life, and they have a right to expect that the government in some ways will look after them after working their entire life and paying taxes. But we have to also be realistic about, well, what do we reasonably expect Australians to fund? And as the Productivity Commission pointed out, they think we would need a 21% increase in taxes if we don't do things like this to fund the ageing of the population. And I don't think many Australians would be happy to accept a 21% increase in taxes.
What about the suggestion that we should be putting at least part of the increase in the value of our homes that many of us will own at retirement, that should be going into our costs?
Well, I think that's it's a unique policy solution. I think that it does have some merit. At the other end, when we have the next generation of Australians coming through who will actually be paying for the ageing of the population, because they'll be the revenue base, the working population, we have enormous problems where they can't even get into a home in the first place. And I think there's policy areas that we can look at that would help younger Australians get into the housing market. It is quite unique, and the Productivity Commission points this out, that you have one generation of Australians that effectively won't be in the property market, and the ageing of the population, predominantly they are in the property market. So I think that it is a reasonable area to look at, and we need to look at innovative policy solutions around that.
To close on this issue, unusual at least a little bit that the youngest of our MPs should develop a passion for paying for the ageing in our society, or don't you see it that way?
Well, I see it, the reality of the ageing of the population in this country is that it is my generation that will pay for the predecessor generation as they enter retirement, because we will be the ones working and paying taxes. So when the Productivity Commission talks about a 21% increase in taxes, it's not those that are not working that will be paying those taxes. And I think throughout my parliamentary career, I've always seen a real connection between the baby boomers and Gen Y working together on these issues, and I would really like to see the two generations coming together. I think that at a local level, I've seen that work very well, and if we don't get those things right, it will be a big, long-term intergenerational policy challenge for us as a nation. And I think the ageing of the population is a challenge, not a problem, but it will be the biggest public policy challenge we face in the next 30 years, and we have to have a mature debate about that, and we can't put our heads in the sand and put that off for the next 30 years.
Wyatt Roy, has Prime Minister Tony Abbott been right to not say sorry to the Indonesian president over the intelligence scandal?
Well, I think that what the Prime Minister has said is that there is a regret for the embarrassment that has been caused, and we saw that in the Parliament, and there is a bipartisan approach on this. I think that the things that unite our two nations are much greater than the things that divide us, and we do have a very significant and important relationship with Indonesia. There are challenges and roadblocks along the way, and we've seen that in recent history, but I think that the Indonesian president has written to the Prime Minister. He is responding, and I have no doubt that the Australia-Indonesian relationship will prosper into the future. We have to work through these issues, and we're doing that.
Should the Prime Minister say to Mark Textor that given the tweets that he made that have added offence to the Indonesian scandal, should he say to Mark Textor, your services are no longer required?
Well, Mark Textor is an individual who runs a company. He's not a member of Parliament. He's not a member of the government. It's a matter for him what he does. And I think that what we can focus on is our direct relationships with Indonesia as the government.
Okay, tell me, with hindsight, how do you view Edward Snowden? Hero or traitor?
Well, there is, this is sort of a perpetual sort of argument. I think there are a couple of issues here. I think there is a legitimate debate around free speech, and we do not want to impinge on free speech, and we don't want to impinge on, a journalist, for example, partaking in what a journalist would normally be reasonably expected to do. I think where there is an issue is where it endangers lives. And if a decision made by an individual, whether it's Mr. Snowden or others, and it endangers lives, then I think that there is a serious issue there, and we should try and make those distinctions. And it's not black and white. There is a lot of grey here, but if you're simply doing something that you could say is part of free speech, well, that's okay. But if you've damaged a relationship or you've endangered lives, then I think that that's another matter, and history will be the judge of that. I don't think you should make those judgments in the moment.
The Guardian and the ABC have been roundly criticised by some for even publishing Snowden's allegations, for making this affair as public as it has been. Did the Guardian and the ABC do the right thing? Well,
they are journalists, and there is a public interest, and if it is in the public interest, if it doesn't endanger lives, then they have that right to do that. As I said, if those actions do something to unnecessarily damage a relationship that may well endanger lives, then I don't think that that's where you have to sort of draw the line on these issues.
Wyatt Roy, always plenty to talk about on Fridays when you come on Breaking Politics. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Tim. Cheers.